grandkids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hello, this is Tyler Ross, and welcome to Learning to Dad. My guest today is Marty Russo. Marty served in the U.S. House of Representatives from Illinois from 1975 to 1993. He entered the office at just 30 years old. He went on to work at the lobbying firm Cassidy & Associates, where he became the CEO. Marty now runs his own consulting firm and often lectures on how businesses and associations can have more influence in Washington, with a mantra often being just get involved. Marty's a first-generation Italian-American born and raised in Chicago. He got his law degree from DePaul. He started as an attorney prosecuting street gangs. He even has a credit appearing on the TV series Alpha House. He's undoubtedly a Chicago White Sox fan. And were you the MVP of the Congressional baseball game? Twice? 2 times? And to boot, he is a father and a grandfather. Thank you very much for giving me your time.
Oh, Tyler, it's my pleasure. It's really great to be here with you, and hopefully we both can enjoy what we're going to be doing this morning.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, that list, did I miss anything?
No, that's pretty good. It covers a lot. It covers quite a bit.
So, we're talking here because there are not really any metrics to measure the success of parenthood the way that there is in public service, where you have votes. You can measure your success on presentation of something, or in business where you have accounting. So the idea is to figure out how to be a better parent through experience in your professional life. So I wonder just if you could talk a little bit about the place that you grew up, what that culture was like, and kind of ultimately what led you to your first job, your first work, professional experience.
Well, let me just start by giving you a little background about myself. I'm the first generation Italian-American. My dad was born in Italy in 1912. He came here with his parents in 1920. Didn't speak the language, which is, when you think about it, the heroes they must have been, all those immigrants who came here from overseas, whether it's from Italy, France, Germany, wherever they came from. Ireland, at least they speak the language in Ireland, but they come here and they don't know anybody and they don't speak the language.
Yeah.
And the key thing for them to do is to create a family unit so that they're all together. And in my dad's case, they moved to an area called Little Italy in Chicago. And the reason they moved there is because the whole community was all Italian Americans. And a lot of them came from the same region that my grandparents are from. Mm-hmm. So they had a lot in common. They spoke the language. Yeah. And over time, they began to learn English. Now, my grandmother never learned English because she refused to accept America as her home, because she loved Italy. She never wanted to move, but she did. But the background is that there was a very, very close-knit neighborhood, because they all had the same kind of issues. Mm-hmm. But they were also all construction workers, too. They worked hard for a very hard life, trying to raise children in that kind of an atmosphere. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was an eye-opening experience. It was a tough neighborhood, so you had to earn your spurs pretty quickly. But you learned a lot about life quickly because of that. And my dad worked 3 jobs while I was growing up, so I hardly saw him, but he was the person who gave me the most inspiration, because when I did get to see him, he spent a lot of time talking about what would be great for me, for my future. And the key word that always came out of his mouth was education, education, education. My dad actually went to 2 years of junior college before he had to quit and go out and earn money. Now,
in Chicago?
In Chicago, yes. My dad was an accomplished musician. He played 7 instruments.
Wow.
He played for Sally Rand at the World's Fair in 1932, and he played with the Wayne King Band. Wow. And during the Depression, he had a thing called Claude Russo and the 10 Hot Shots. That was a band, and they would play at speakeasies and get cash, and that's how the family survived during the crash.
Yeah.
So my dad was out there doing that while he was still going to school. He was an engineering major, and he's a great, great engineer. Obviously, when you start learning music, it's all mathematics, and my dad was a mathematic genius.
Yeah.
So that's why he could play so many instruments. The interesting thing was he can play those songs that he played 50 years ago, pick up his sax and clarinet, and play the same tunes.
Just like
Never
that.
with a piece of sheet music. And he could play the violin, he could play the piano, he played the mandolin and guitar. So he was an accomplished musician, but he always said, education, education. Remember this, Marty, and never forget it. Once you have your education, nobody can take it away from you. And then if you're in the right place at the right time, that education makes a difference for you.
Yeah.
So he was a person that really made me want to do things. And watching him work 3 jobs, it's almost hard to believe that you can find 3 jobs in that amount of time.
Right.
But he worked construction, and then he worked the late shift on the Studebaker line, and he owned a tavern. And my dad didn't drink.
Yeah.
But he did all that because he had 4 kids at home. And it was a way of making money. I mean, it was tough in those early days. I wore my brother's clothes and shoes and pants and all that stuff because, it was a tough time. But that's why education was important, because it's the way to grow and get better and do better for yourself. And so seeing him work that hard and do all the things that he was doing to make sure that he gave his family a good life made me work really hard at what I was doing. I'm the first one in my family to graduate college and go on to law school.
Yeah.
So I owe most of that to my dad.
Do you feel like his experience in working in 3 jobs plus pursuing successfully music, do you feel like one of those was a calling and the other was kind of like a hustle? Or do you think the calling might have been taking care of his family?
Well, I think taking care of his family was number one, was paramount in anything. I mean, the family meant everything. I mean, we all ate every Sunday.
Yeah.
Everybody came in, my aunts and uncles, we all ate. We ate dinner. We had lunch at about noon, between 12 and 1 o'clock, and everybody gathered because in the complex that we lived in, there were 4 different buildings. They were all relatives. Nobody else was there. There was no outsiders. They were all relatives, and so on Sundays we would all get together, and then they would also play cards together. They would. And then down the way, that people would have a bocce court, and they would go. So it was really like the whole neighborhood was like a family.
Yeah.
But in our place, we had like what today you would call condos in the back, very small, 1 building, and then 2 separate buildings with a gangway in between them.
Yeah.
And everybody there was a relative. And so you grew up with your family. So family was the thing that came to the forefront in everything we did. So I grew up that way.
Yeah.
And I think, his hard work was to make enough money to send his kids to school. Now, back in those days, the Italians that came over from Italy, it was the boy that goes to school and gets the education, and the girls go work and stay home and have children.
Right.
So, but my brother and I went to college. My brother dropped out of college after his 2nd year. My 2 sisters went to secretarial school, and I'm the only one that actually finished college and finished law school. But that's how they thought back then.
Yeah.
Today it's totally different. Obviously, women deserve a greater place in society, and they're doing it and doing great. And it's been good for the rest of us that the women are a much more prominent role. But back then that wasn't the case. It was stay-at-home mom, and my mom basically raised all of us. My grandmother lived in the same house as my grandfather lived with us until he passed away. So the family unit was not just our family, but was the extended family of my grandmother's sisters, my grandfather's brothers, all in the same complex with all the grandchildren that they had. So it was a great experience. It made me who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm very family oriented. My dad was a major problem solver for the family. My Uncle Marty, for whom I'm named, never had any children. So I was his adopted son. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I had 2 people in my life who had major impact on me, my father and my uncle.
So I keep envisioning these scenes in movies of big Italian families just being together and laughing, and just the love in the room being just so dense and amazing.
It was, and it's like I say, it's an experience I'm glad I went through. It was tough, but it made me who I am today, and I don't regret one bit of it. I'm glad we had the opportunity to move to another part of Chicago, like Oak Park, which is considered more uppity back then. And my dad didn't do it. He liked the neighborhood we were in. He liked the people around us. And we were much more grounded because of that.
So with your father's role being the problem solver and the support system and the source of inspiration for education in that period of time, how do you feel that role might have manifested for you as a father, as a different generation? Did you feel like it was the same role, or did you play a different role?
Well, I think it shaped who I am. I am a problem solver. I'm always there. My kids were growing up to be there for them. Remember, 18 years of my son Tony's life, I wasn't around. Mm-hmm. He was 6 when I went to Congress. Dan was born while I was in Congress, so in those younger years, I wasn't there as much as I would have. My dad, my dad was home every day, even though I didn't see him that much. But it made me always want to make sure I was around when my children had something important to do. I would fly back from Washington to see a basketball game.
Yeah.
I would fly back to Washington to see him perform something. So I wanted to make sure that they understood that they meant the world to me, mm-hmm. and anything that was important to them, their father was going to be there.
I think that's a really great segue into a question that I had loaded I wanted to ask you, because as a public servant for so long, you impacted people by the hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, in huge masses. And I would think that other people that have public exposure like that often have to sacrifice being there for the few to make an impact on the many. In your experience, can you share kind of reconciling that for someone who might be pursuing the public good versus, just being at home as often as possible?
Well, people don't understand how tough a job being in Congress is, because you're in 2 different places. Mm-hmm. Your constituents want you when you come home. Your colleagues want you when you're in D.C. trying to do things for the country as a whole.
Yeah.
And so it's a balancing act. But my balance was my kids were first. Mm-hmm. So if something came up on a Saturday when I was home and I was asked to do a bunch of different events, my children and my family came first, and then I did the events. Just to give you a typical weekend as a public figure, because I came home every weekend. It's a short flight from Washington to Chicago. I would fly in on Friday afternoon, and then my staff would have 4 or 5 events for me to do Friday night. Then I would get home, see the family, get up the next morning, do a town hall meeting, wow. and do about 4 or 5 events on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Sunday, family did what we did in family, go to church and all that stuff. And then I'd have maybe a Little League game to go throw the ball out at. Mm-hmm. Or I have some other church event that they want me at. And that was the week. But in between all those things, my staff understood one thing: you have to build time in for me to spend time with my family. And if my son had a basketball game, which both boys play basketball, I'd be at the basketball game, because I wanted them to know that they were the number one priority. And they knew that. And I think even though you're away, like I would call every day, I would speak to them on the phone to let them know Dad missed them, cared a lot about them, and was involved. And I had a great wife. I have a great wife. I mean, we were married almost 53 years. She carried the burden. She was a school teacher. She carried the burden of raising my children while I wasn't around, at the same time working full-time as a high school teacher. And I had wonderful, wonderful in-laws. My mother-in-law is the greatest woman I ever met in my life. She took care of my children while my wife was at school, and then she was there to, her and her 2 daughters who lived with her would take care of my children when they were out of school and give comfort and company to my wife while I was gone. Mm-hmm. So the whole support structure that I had made it a little easier. A lot of members had a very difficult time. Members get divorced after a while. They're not home enough and things happen. And so it's, people don't understand, when you have 2 different homes that you have to go back and forth with, and you have responsibilities in 2 places, it is a strain on any marriage.
Yeah.
And on any family life. And the question is, do you have the right person with you to be able to make it happen? And I did.
So living in those 2 worlds, I wonder if you had to make transitions every time you went from Washington back home, and I'd imagine in the public eye, you have to be careful about, even the most simple of comments being taken out of context and having to be careful how you communicate. Did you have to change the way you communicated at home?
No, I didn't, because there wasn't any social media back there. So basically, if I'm at a town hall meeting and I'm getting into it with a constituent, I was myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they appreciated that. I mean, I was a very candid person.
Yeah.
And they asked a question, I gave an answer. Even if they didn't like the answer, this is how I feel about things, and we would debate it. They don't do that today. But back then, you can have some really good dialogue with your constituents. Mm-hmm. And it was good. It was good for me. It was good for them. It was better for the country, and that people understand why you do things. So I thoroughly enjoyed doing that, but at the same time, my family was very important. I've commuted for almost 24 years.
Yeah.
Before I actually end up moving to D.C. and staying here, and having my family here. Now all my family's here now. I mean, both my boys are married. They live. Each of them lives about 4 minutes from where I live.
Yeah.
And I see my 5 grandchildren just about every day.
Amazing.
And so it's very, and on Sunday evenings, we get together as a family and have food and have barbecue or whatever. We stay in touch. So it's very good. It reminds me a lot of what I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Family would get together, all the cousins were together. And so in this situation, my 5 grandchildren, they get to know each other, because even though they go from 16 to 5, mm-hmm. and 16, 12, 9, 7, 5.
Wow.
So they're around each other.
Yeah.
And they help each other out, which is really great. And I sit there as a grandparent and say to myself, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
This is how I always envisioned it to be. And you never stop being a dad. Mm-hmm. So even when the kids grow up and adults and they have their own family, you still never stop being a dad.
How's it changed? Like when you were raising your boys and then now you're grandfather and your boys are adults with their families, how's your role as a dad or grandfather?
Well, my role as a dad is to be inspirational.
Yeah.
As much as I can, because that's what my dad did for me. I could tell you a story about when I wanted to quit law school. I've been in school since I was 4 years old, and after my first year of law school, I was actually burned out. Law school was not easy. It's a tough grind, and I had gotten out of undergrad school in 3 years. So I went to school summers and nights. Mm-hmm. I'm one of these impatient people. Yeah. I wish I could get it done yesterday. So I did all my credits in 3 years. Mm-hmm. Then went to law school, and then my first year of law school was like my elective hours. So I got 2 degrees in 6 years. In 6 years instead of 7 years.
Right.
I was burned out.
Yeah.
I went home. I never forget. I went home one day from school. I went to my mom. I said, "Look, Mom, I just can't do this anymore. I'm fried. I'm tired. I just can't keep this routine up, and I'm going to quit law school." And she said, "Well, look, don't do anything until you talk to your father." And so I sat down with my father, and I went through the whole thing with him. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, look." And I said, Dad, I don't have a car. I very rarely have any money in my pocket to go out on dates. I work at a shoe store, a women's shoe store, making whatever I can make. Sometimes I make $4 an hour, $5 an hour, but it's only part-time. I said, my other friends, they drive cars. He said, look, let me explain something. And back then, working construction, the big pay was $3.50 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, me making $4 an hour for 20 hours worth of work was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But again, you go from law school in Chicago, shopping days were Monday nights, Thursday nights, Saturdays. That's the days I worked, and I studied in between. And I just can't keep this pace up. He said, look, I can get you a job on construction. You can make, the max $3, $3.50 an hour, and that's not a problem. I can do that for you. He said, look at me. I work in the wintertime. It's cold. I got to mix concrete and stuff when it's very cold out. Mm-hmm. I got to listen to other people tell me what to do, where to go, how to work. He said, now, that can happen to you, and I can help you. You can grow in this business, and you can probably be like I am, a supervisor, but look all the stuff you have to go through. You're not your own boss. Now, the alternative is you finish law school, you're your own boss. Now, how do you want to live the rest of 50 years of your life? Do you want to live it like I do? Where in the wintertime your back bothers you, your elbows bother you, you're cold, you're freezing outside? Or do you want to take a chance on being your own boss? And he said, that's a choice. I can help you either way.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Dad, if you're asking me to pick for myself, I will pick for myself. I don't want to go on to law school.
Yeah.
He says, well, look, son, if you don't want to do it for yourself, why don't you do it for me? And when he said that, something clicked in my brain that said, whoa, my dad wants me to do this for him? That's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And from that day on, I got the best grades I could get. I got married to my lovely wife in my second year in law school. My grades went up even better after that, and the rest is history. And like he once said to me, education can never be taken from you, so just be prepared, because someday something may happen, and that education is going to make a difference for you. And it did. Having been a prosecutor for 3 years, all of a sudden somebody came to me and said, would you like to run for Congress in a district that Democrats can't win? Now, they wouldn't have come to me if I didn't have that education, that background that I had, and that led to what I have today. So I remember that story. And the basic thing that I try to do with my kids is to be there when they need me. The problem I have is that I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
And I always try to solve the problem because I don't want my kids to go through any of the pain, some of the pain I had to live with. I think we all feel that way about our kids. Can we make a better life for them than we? I have a great life. It's hard. It's really hard for my kids to look at their dad and say, well, I want to be better than my dad. They can be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in politics. It can be anything you want, as long as you're happy. So I try to step back from the problem-solving role.
Yeah.
I try to stay there, okay, I'm here. If you need me, I'm here. And I think the best thing a parent can do with adult children is to not interfere in their lives, but let them know that you're there to support them anytime they need you. And that's what I try to do. And my wife is a gem on that. Yeah. She's also very, very close to them, works very hard with them, and they talk to her as much as they talk to me. But I wanted to make sure they understand that it's not my life I want them to live. I want them to live their life. And I think both my boys are doing a very good job at that. They're very happy, and they've had some struggles. There's no question. My son Tony almost died of leukemia at age 26.
Yeah.
He's a survivor. It's a great thing for me. My son Dan, he's happy in what he's doing. And so I just try to be there for them. I think one of the things that I've learned that I wish I knew way back when is to be a good listener. I think the key is to make sure you allow your kids to talk with you, that they know that they can speak with you at any time they want. That's something I learned over time. I wish I'd have had back then.
Yeah.
But it's doing me in good stead now, and I've basically indicated to my kids that's one of the things that they should do with their young children. The key is listen to them. Give them the opportunity to express how they feel to you.
Yeah.
Don't always step in and say, well, here's how we're going to solve it. This is what you need to do. Go here, go that, and I'll take care of this. It's not, you can't solve all the problems for them. Sometimes they have to make the mistake so they can learn from the mistake.
Right.
And so my whole purpose, even with my grandchildren, I want to listen to you. Tell Grandpa what's the problem.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And then they open up to you. So I wish way back when I was having my own children and going through some of the things I went through, that I was a better listener rather than a problem solver. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. I mean, my recommendation to people out there who are listening is listen to your kids. Give them the opportunity to open up to you. Don't always say, here's how you do it, I'll solve this, I'll make a phone call for it. Don't do that. Listen to them.
So is there a trigger or kind of a mindful practice that you might recommend that could put somebody in that place to, instead of, go with their gut and try to fix the problem, step back and be patient with it?
Tyler, my problem is I didn't learn that until later on in life. I realized that I moved too quickly. That's a plus for me and a minus for me. My strength is my weakness.
Yeah.
My strength is I want to solve the problem.
Right.
My weakness is I want to solve the problem. What you want your children to learn is you make a problem into an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's the key. Things are going to go wrong. There are going to be problems in life. But you have to look at the problem and say, okay, this is my problem. Now, how do I take that problem and turn it into an opportunity? To me, that's critical. And that's the thing that back then I didn't think about. I thought about, there's a problem, I'm solving it.
Yeah.
Boom, done. I've probably missed a bunch of opportunities of making things even better for my children by allowing them, you make the mistake, we figure out what the mistake is, we're sorry for the mistake, but now what do we learn from the mistake? What's the opportunity that comes out of that mistake? And that's the thing I think is very critical today, especially today with all the things that are going on with social media and the pressures, the peer pressure that goes on. Focus on, if I make a mistake, how do I turn it into an opportunity? That's the thing I tell my children today.
Yeah. The thing that you said about trying to help versus solving the problem, help creating the opportunity, it reminds me of a thought I have about non-parents. I feel like people without children don't understand the depths of emotions associated with having kids. How much you can actually love someone isn't apparent until you've had a child. Do you think a child can love their parent back at that level?
I don't quite follow the question. You're saying
Well, we'd all throw ourselves in front of a bus for our kids. And before kids, we might not have felt that way about anybody. I've never cared more about anything in my entire life than my children. And I wonder if my kids will ever understand that, if my perspective is tainted by how much love I have for them because they don't understand it.
Oh, they understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they understand it. And in giving the love you're giving them, you are inspiring to be the person they are.
Mm-hmm.
So they're sitting there. Maybe they don't totally understand it, but children are so impacted in how their parents treat them when they're young.
Yeah.
Remember, they're absorbing knowledge. They don't have a lot of knowledge. What we feed them is the knowledge they have, what they see, what they hear, who they play with, what people say. They're absorbing all because they're just here 3-4 years on earth, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. They're absorbing. So we have to make sure we're inspirational. Mm-hmm. We love them. Because hopefully when they grow up to be adults and have their own children, they then reflect what you taught them. I saw something about one of the actresses, a famous actress, about what a horrible childhood she had. Mm-hmm. And now at age 80, she finally understands it. It took her 80 years.
Yeah.
So the impact that parents have on their children is awesome.
Yeah.
It could be really great. It could be really horrible. Mm-hmm. So if you're concerned about how your children are going to view it later on in life, it depends on how you treat them now.
Yeah.
It's a lasting memory. It never leaves their mind. So the subconscious never forgets. The conscious does, but the subconscious never. So, like I said, when I had this big choice of deciding whether to go or not, my conscious mind said, I'm sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm ready to quit.
Yeah.
And then when my dad hit me with do it for me, it's like all the things he did for me in my entire life, working 3 jobs, doing all the things he could to be around us and helping us, it all just came right out to me.
Yeah.
And said, wow, he did all that for me, and all he's asking me is to finish my education. I think I can handle that. So it was bred in me. I didn't know it was going to ever happen like that, right?
Yeah.
But because I had this wonderful experience with my mom and dad, that at the moment of truth, when he pushed my button, I reacted to the button. And that's all because of everything he did before that and was doing at that point.
to have that moment of awareness like that.
Yeah, it was unreal.
so
I mean, I tell
powerful.
you, it's kind of spooky. It was like, oh, you know, it's like, you know, and I hope I've been an inspiration to my two sons.
Yeah.
And I try to be an inspiration to my grandchildren, especially the two that are older. I think that's my role. My role is to be inspirational, to love them and help them, and most of all, listen to them.
Yeah. Now, where were you in your professional life when you had your first son?
I was a practicing lawyer, local practice, when I had my son, Tony. That was in 1968.
And did that impact your decision to be a public servant in the form of being a congressman?
No, not really. I didn't aspire to that. My job was to be a good lawyer, provide a good living for my children. I only had one at the time. During those first 6 years before I went to Congress, I mean, I spent a lot of time with Tony.
Yeah.
And I would say, because I spent a lot of that time with him at such early, I, over time, had a much better and closer relationship with him than I had with Dan early on, but over time that changed. And the relationships are very strong, but I will tell you, because I was home every night and saw him every night, had a better effect on him in terms of me and him, whereas Dan, I wasn't home except on weekends. And I think I missed out on some things I would have liked to have done with him as I did with Tony from age 0 to 6.
Yeah.
But in the long run, because you show the love, you care, and you do things with them, you can overcome some of the time when you weren't. Look, my dad worked 3 jobs. I hardly ever saw him.
Yeah.
But when I did see him, it was quality.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do with my children, myself, because when you're gone 5 days a week, and then sometimes you're traveling and you're gone, you're speaking somewhere, you're not home all the time. When you are there, they have to be the center of attention. So it's quality versus quantity.
I've noticed a difference in myself trying to be more present for my kids, because we live in a world of just extraordinary distraction where, being 100% engaged in one thing is becoming increasingly difficult because we've got phones and iPads and televisions everywhere. Do you have any comments on kind of watching, your experience as a father and watching your grandkids having all these things, or just the world in general?
Well, it's very different watching my grandchildren versus my children. My grandchildren, these young kids, live on iPads and video games that they see. So I try to have a little bit of a restriction on them when you're at the table, nothing, and no more than an hour a day when you're around me.
Yeah.
I think my boys both do the same thing, so the kids are beginning to learn that there are limitations, because you have to set limitations. Otherwise, they'll just keep doing what they're doing because that's what they want to do. I think it's a lot tougher job today because of all these distractions that are going on. But that's the same token. One of the things I realized with my oldest grandson is he does a lot of research on this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really great when he'll come back to me, starts talking to me about what happened in World War II. And I'm like, wow, where'd you learn that? Well, Grandpa, did you know? Blah, 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 blah. So the tool that they have can be a great tool, an educational tool, versus just a fun and game tool.
Yeah.
So as I watch my oldest grandson, who's 12, from the time he started with computers and little games to where he's at today, he's gone from someone who loves to play games, but now realizes there's all this research component.
Yeah.
He can gather all this knowledge. And I think it's incredible. And I hope my other grandchildren, as they get older, will follow in his footsteps.
I think there's a way to encourage that curiosity.
Well, I think as a parent, your job is to do that.
Yeah.
Your job is to monitor what they're doing, because today it's totally different than when I had children and when I was a kid. We didn't have all this stuff at our disposal. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I think it's, if I want to look up something, I go to my iPhone, I hit something and I put it in, and up comes the answer. I mean, I never had that when I was a kid. I remember people coming by trying to sell you Encyclopedia Britannicas, because if you wanted knowledge, you had all these books you had to go to. Well, our parents couldn't afford a set of that, so we have to go to the library, right?
Yeah.
Today, the kids, They pop up something, and there it is. Even today in law school, if you want to do research in law school, you just have Westlaw on your computer, push a button, you put what you're interested in, and all of a sudden all the cases pop up. I never had that. I had to go to the library and look at them. You know, it's so different. I think that's why we expect so much more from children today. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more pressure on them because we are demanding more from them. I watch with my grandkids. Even in fourth grade, the courses they're studying, I didn't get that until I was in high school.
Yeah.
So all this information actually is terrific if you channeled it correctly, because it's there to educate them. And so because we have all these tools, we expect students today to do much better.
Yeah.
And frankly, they do.
Yeah, and you talked about monitoring kids and restricting kids. That's a great opportunity to ask you about punishment, because I view punishment, it's like if you're bowling and you put the inflatable things in the gutters to keep the ball from going into the gutters. You give them a little bit of a path, but you don't want them to go into the gutter. Mm-hmm. But what's your opinion on punishment and kind of the evolution of it?
Well, the evolution is a lot different than when I was a kid on punishment and when I was a parent as punishment. Look at it today. That's why I said if there's anything I've learned that I wish I knew back then, was the ability to listen to my children. Instead of punishing them, I think, they made a mistake. What you need to do is sit down and have them explain to you. Mm-hmm. Why did they do what they did? Talk to me. Tell me why. And I think if you do that, this idea of getting punished by physical, you get slapped on the butt or whatever, that accomplishes absolutely nothing. Yelling at kids accomplishes absolutely nothing. Maybe in the old days they did, you were afraid, whatever. I didn't have that problem. My dad wasn't that type of person. But I think what we're missing in society today is the ability to say, okay, I'm confronting the problem. My son made a mistake or my daughter made a mistake. Okay, I have a choice. I can yell at them. Mm-hmm. I put them in timeout, this thing that I learned about years ago, put kids in timeout. Yeah. I don't think that helps them understand what happened.
Right.
I think what we need to understand is why did it happen? Mm-hmm. So talk to them.
Yeah.
Give them the opportunity to make their case, and then whatever punishment you may render, they'll understand it better. But I think, again, I come down to this one thing. There's a problem. It's a mistake. We understand that. Now, how do I take that problem and make it into opportunity for my grandchild or my son? How do I do that? I think if we focus on what we can get out of it, mm-hmm. and how we can help them versus punish them, I think society would be better off, because punishing has long-lasting effects on children.
Right.
You think it blows away, but it doesn't. It stays in the back of that brain, mm-hmm. and that brain recalls it in situations where it reminds them of what happened.
Yeah.
I rather they say, geez, I had that problem, and my dad said, talk to me about it. I did, and I found I made a big mistake, and I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do this as a result of that. So that's what you want. And I think parenting is difficult today because there's a lot of distractions. So you've got to make sure your children are in tune with you, that they know anytime I do something, no matter how bad it is, I can go to my parents and say, here's what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry about it. Help me.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's really great. Talk about education for a minute. If you had a magic wand and you could wave an educational system in front of your grandchildren, how would you want them to be educated?
Well, I think it's up to them.
Yeah.
I think the real true is that what are they like? I mean, not everybody has to be a lawyer. Not everybody has to be a doctor. I mean, there's a lot of trades out there that we need. We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need scientists, we need engineers. We need policemen, we need firemen, we need teachers. You have to encourage them to find what they like, mm-hmm. not what you like.
Yeah.
Now, it was drilled in me by my Uncle Marty that the greatest thing in the world is to be a lawyer. I never thought about anything else because I adored my uncle. He died very young at age 52, and I hadn't gone to law school yet. I was going to be going to law school when he passed away. So I never thought about anything else. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But there's so many options today, and And you just have to have the child pick it out, see what they like. Maybe it's an airline pilot. Maybe it's going into the Navy, and maybe it's going becoming a Marine or an Army they have to figure that out. You can help them if you listen to them. If you dictate to them what you think they should do, I think you're making a huge mistake, because then they're not going to want to do it because they want to do it.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that would be the key for me, is tell me what you're interested in. Now, in 7th grade, or what they call here, middle school,
junior high,
you may think you want one thing. I always wanted to be an engineer because my dad was one. He has an engineering background. Look what I ended up. I ended up in law school, ended up a member of Congress, something that was never in my thinking.
Yeah.
Some people grow up all their lives wanting to be a public figure. I never did. So it depends on how you feel about issues. I was content on being a lawyer, making a decent living for my family, and then opportunity came in, and I got lucky, right? But I wouldn't have got lucky if I didn't have the educational background to be able to step into that and do and run for Congress to see if I was competent enough to do it. Yeah. So, but unless they like what they're doing, they'll never be successful.
Great. I want to jump into a little bit of a lightning type round.
Sure.
Just kind of a handful of questions.
Is this double jeopardy?
How much are you betting? How much do you wager? If you were going to write a book about your professional and parental life, what would be the name of some of the chapters?
Oh, well, I don't know about some of the chapters, but I know the title of the book would be Make a Problem into an Opportunity.
I love that. What is a gift that you could give to another dad that you would like every dad to have?
Listening.
Listening, the ability to listen. What physical thing does every dad need?
Well, for me, it's a golf club. I don't know about anybody else, but physical thing, that's all I can think of. I mean...
Yeah. And you get to do that with your kids.
Well, I love athletics. I do athletics with both my boys when they were growing up, and I think that helps round them out. I mean, I don't want just a bookworm. I want my kids to be well-rounded. I think that helps them in any profession they go into, or any trade they go into. So you want to make sure that they're well-rounded. That's it. Give them the tools and let them do with it as they please.
What is there a TV dad, a movie dad that you liked?
A movie dad that I like? No, not really. A movie dad, I can't. I'm just trying to think. Right off the top of my head, I can't come up with any particular movie dad. You know, we have Father's Knows Best with. It's way back when Robert Young, Father's Knows Best. It's about the, well, you know, the other one that was really kind of cool was Ozzie Nelson, and Ozzie and Harriet was a show back then. That was a family-oriented show. Today, the one I like that's family-oriented in the end is a thing called Blue Bloods. What I like about it the most is that every show ends with them having dinner on Sunday all together in the house.
That's wonderful. I love that. What is your greatest hope for children?
That they're happy. They're happy in what they do.
A podcaster named Tim Ferriss, a guy that I've listened a lot to, likes to ask a question. If you had a billboard on I-95, I'm sure he uses
horrible street.
Something in L.A. Yeah, but every dad saw your billboard. What would you populate the billboard with?
Love your family.
Love your family. And I'll call this our last question. If this recording lasted 10 generations, your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren would hear it, what might be something you'd like them to hear?
Well, what I would like them to get out of it is that they need to love their children. They need to be involved in their lives. They need to listen to them, and need to help them when they want to help.
It's awesome. Well, is there anything else that...
No, I had a great time.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No,
to
my
talk.
pleasure. My pleasure.
That's awesome.